welcome to another episode of Just Two Girls Who Work Together and That Guy. And today we're talking about one of my favorites from Chattanooga, Tennessee, Mr. Usher Raymond himself. This weekend he had a huge announcement. He's going to be doing a residency in Vegas. I've never seen him live before, so I'm going. I'm getting my tickets in a few days, the pre-sale, because the bitch is going to be mad if it sell out.
Yeah, I haven't seen him live either, and he's definitely been my boyfriend in my head forever, but I've not had the opportunity to see him live. So it's going to be super exciting. I will be going to that. So, yeah.
I've seen Usher on his OMG tour, which came to Nashville. It was about 2010, 2011, I believe, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's one of my favorite artists, so I think it's a cool move for him to do this Vegas residency. I think it's pretty cool.
Cool. Yeah, I think for me, I'm always in this headspace of like, how do you condense like all of that music, all of those albums? What story are they gonna tell? It's just gonna be interesting to see how they go about that and how they approach it.
Yeah, I hope they put together something production-wise very cool. You know, when you have a Vegas residency, it's like go big or go home, and so it'd be really cool to see like what they come up with, especially for somebody like Usher, since we haven't really seen a large-scale something from him in a long while. I think it'd be kind of cool to see what they come up with.
He's such a showman. He's such a showman, so I'm expecting it to be great. Like, for me, when I heard that Jennifer Lopez was doing a residency, like I expected it to be a great show because she is the great. Yeah. So I expected that, and that's what I'm expecting from Usher. But I also expect like him really singing in the way in which like people haven't seen him do in a while. Like we talked about this earlier, Rashad. People were like blown away by him doing like those acapella versions of his songs. Like he can blow. Like he really can sing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he can really dance. Like, he's definitely a triple threat, all-around star, and I can't wait to see what he does. He gave us a little bit on Good Morning America on Friday, and he did a cappella, actually. Like, the slow songs, he did a mix of a lot of hits, and then he did a mix of all his up-tempo hits, so I'm excited.
Okay, yeah, seems like they're on the promo trail now.
Right.
With that already, and I mean, I hope he does include some of the fan favorite songs that we don't get to hear him perform much. You know, that would be really cool for this Vegas residency as well.
Yeah, because didn't Janet kind of do the same thing? It was like she did a tour that 1 year, and it was like all the hits, you know, but then the second time around, I think it was like intimate. I think she did like intimate settings with songs that were like album fillers. I heard a lot of people that went to see Vegas residency, it was like album songs, album cut.
Yeah, in that Vegas show, it was a lot of songs that she hadn't either performed in a while or like we have never heard live. And she did that on some of her tours too. She started integrating a lot of the, you know, album cuts that her fans really love, and it's really cool. It switches it up because when you get to that position like a Janet or even an Usher, when you get to that level in your career, everybody gets used to you performing those songs like all the time, like the hits and the medleys and putting them together. But like, it's really special when they start throwing in songs that you haven't heard them sing in like forever, or even heard them sing it all live. So I hope Usher does bring that to his show.
Right, and for like a residency, you know, this is the true fans coming to see him. So I hope that it's like more intimate. We get like chats and background stories in between songs and stuff, and he goes all the way in with performances.
Yeah. For me, I definitely can see him because I've seen him do this a little bit, and you know, he's a part of Ocean 7, and kind of their whole theme is like that kind of that Frank Sinatra Rat Pack kind of theme. So I can see him kind of taking that route. Maybe sitting on a chair singing a few ballads, you know. I can see him taking that route for sure.
Yeah,
I can see that too, and I would love that. I would love that throughout the show, but I still want like a big production. Like I still want the like in it. So
and it's Usher, so you know he's gonna do it big. I mean, all of his tours are amazing. I never got to see him live, but I actually have, you know, the tour that he went on after Confessions. I have that on DVD. I watch that over and over again. Like it's good.
Yeah, I have that one too. Yeah, I watch that a lot. It's really good.
Right.
You know, I can see him now. And now my friend coming out, we have Jermaine Dupri. I can see him doing that. I can see him doing that. Right. But yeah, I mean, that's like the theme right now, these residencies. I mean, in the past few years, we've seen, J.Lo, we've seen Britney, we've seen, there was rumors of, I believe, Cardi at one point. There were rumors of Beyonce. So like, it's a thing that is happening more often, these residencies. So it's only right. And I feel like he is probably the perfect person to do something like this. Right. Like we said, he's such a showman. And I think it's, I'm just excited right now for the people, like the artists from the 90s that are like having like this resurgence or this moment, like where their flowers are being given to them, because we don't often see that happen in their lifetime or at this age in their career. So it's just really good to see them, get their flowers and people really realize how iconic they really are.
Yeah. Right. And then also, like, I'm wondering when this new album is going to drop, because it's like, okay, so we know a new album is coming. We don't know when, but now we know you have a residency too. So like, which one we going to get first?
Right. And I think with the residency, I think they're kind of cool because, I mean, it used to be when you did a residency in Vegas, it seemed like it was like you were set for a long time. Like you had like, for like a year or two. And then it seems now more so often they're kind of like doing it like dates at a time, like kind of spread over the year or whatever, rather than it being like, it's like 3 shows every, it's interesting the way they're doing it, because now a lot more artists they're coming in and they're kind of interchangeable shows now, like kind of like somebody comes in this theater and then they're out for the next 2 months and it's a different artist, and then that artist, like, it's interesting how they're doing it.
Yeah. And that's exactly what's happening. Like Usher, he's doing like July in the summertime, and then he comes back in like November, December.
Mm-hmm. That's gonna be interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
Very super excited to hear about that. But that was our current topic for this week. As you all know, if you're music heads like us, there has been 2 straight weeks of just albums dropping every Friday. People have been going crazy because I think, with us being in the house, with the pandemic going on, like, to get this music is very refreshing. A lot of artists that you maybe haven't heard in a while are dropping albums. Great reviews about, Big Sean's album. So we haven't had the opportunity to really like sleep with these albums or sit with them at all. So we'll probably be talking about them at some point, but we wanted to kind of touch on the residency because today we're talking about, as Keisha said, none other than R.A.YM.OND, baby. Get into them. So, as he says, yeah, man. So let's get into some things. So today, as y'all know how we do it every single time with the deep dive, we start off talking about early years, then we kind of go into their discography. We talk a little bit about maybe their legacy or what we want to see next, but that's probably the flow that we're going to go. So we'll get into it, and let's talk about Usher early years. We don't want to go as far back as the group that he was in, but not so much in the guys from Chattanooga, because a lot of people don't even know that group or that album even exists.
I didn't.
I probably can't even tell you any of the songs from the album. But we will start 1994. He drops his self-titled album, Usher. So everyone knows of this album or knows of it, but they don't reference it a lot when you talk about his discography. So let's just start here. Let's talk about, he comes out 1994. I think around this time, he falls in line with, like, I think Donnell was out during this time. I think Tevin Campbell was like back end of Tevin Campbell. You had, of course, all the guy groups. I'm trying to think of other young celebrities out during that time. Who do we have?
If I'm not mistaken, I believe, there's been some discrepancy that Tevin Campbell, some of that material was, like, I think Usher was looking at for his debut or whatever. Like, I don't know who was supposed to go to, but I think I know, like, I've seen interviews with Usher's, like, he was under the impression that, like, maybe he thought those were supposed to be his songs or some of them,
Mm-hmm.
But because Babyface was working with Tevin Campbell and Usher was signed to R.A.YM.OND, when he first came out. But
yeah. So it wasn't. There were child, I guess you want to call them prodigies or child celebrities, because he was actually because let's see, Brandy dropped her album 94 as well, 95, but I think he was like that first one during that time that like we are, you know, we start to see him like grow and flourish. But like, let's start 94. He drops this album. Let's talk about it.
Well, technically, this is his first album, but I don't consider it his first album.
Me either. I just know that one song.
Right. So, right.
Right.
But I don't think a lot of people are too familiar with the music on there. I'm not really. I just do know kind of the things surrounding it. Like, you know, wasn't really him. He was signed to R.A.YM, but they sent him to Diddy in New York to get some flavor or whatever you want to call it. Right. And it's obvious they didn't really know what to do with Usher either, you know, and you know, it was very jarring for a lot of people that he was performing such mature material.
So you just said something like they sent him to Puff. Now remember, for the viewers, Puff 94 was like the man. Like,
yeah.
He had the Midas touch at this point.
Yeah, Jodeci, Mary, all that.
Because he had broken off from Uptown. He was starting his own thing. He was the man. So to everyone, I'm sure it made sense. However, you got this kid singing songs that Jodeci would be singing, which they're no longer teenagers because they were teens, but they were going into like adulthood. He was singing the songs, and I know for a fact, Can You Get With It, which was written by Devontae Swing, was like cringeworthy.
Yeah.
Like, he's a kid talking about like when we get to this point, like it was cringe. It was just cringeworthy.
Yeah.
So you got that first album, it drops, doesn't sound like him. He actually is crazy, and I referenced this in when we talked about the Confessions album just a little bit. You got people like Faith doing the backgrounds on here. You have Donnell Jones, who wrote a record or two on here. U.S.H.E.R wrote some records. Dave Hollister, like he has all the right people working on this material, but it just wasn't for him.
Right. And then you also have to, you know, think about like him being whatever age he was at that time. Like, you know, like with Brandy, it was kind of different because it's like they got the age appropriate stuff for her, but it sounded like it went to everybody. Adults liked it, kids liked it. But with Usher, it was kind of like they didn't really, you know, it was kind of like they just kind of gave him stuff, you know, and maybe they didn't really like sit and develop it with him. Maybe, I don't know. But I think it's a testament to how important creative partnerships are, and how like art, like with artists, you can't, even though Diddy at the time was like at his peak, well, maybe not at his peak, but you know, he was the man or whatever. And it's kind of like, you would think that would be an easy, like 1, 2, 3, you know, put him with Diddy, but obviously it wasn't. And that goes to show you can't, with artists, some artists you can't place with just anybody. Like it really does depend on like connecting that creative partnership. Yeah,
and I think it has a lot to do with like Diddy. He was great at developing artists and stuff, but I don't think he had experience developing a child star. So like once Usher got with Jermaine Dupri, who's basically a child star himself, everything just kind of, you know, clicked.
Yeah, it kind of just clicked. You're right. That's a good point.
It is. Which Keisha always gets there earlier than we want to get there.
I'm sorry.
I was trying not to say anything.
No, I was trying not to say it too, but it's okay. It's all right. So he's with Puff, and what's crazy is Puff was super, super young, had endless opportunities to do whatever he wanted to do. I think it was just easy for them to follow like the bad boy model because that's what had been helping them win, right? And so we do this with him, but it just didn't work for his age. It didn't, a lot of people were, like you said, Rashad, like, whoa, this is just too much for his age, you know, don't really want to hear this. And then, so they realized that, right? They realized that that doesn't work for him. And so they transitioned into Keisha's point. They said, hey, we got to go back to the drawing board. And they placed him with Jermaine Dupri. And I think many of us have watched the interview with Jermaine Dupri with T.I. On Expeditiously, where he talks about I asked this kid, what did he want to talk about? Because nobody had asked him that, you know? And then this is how you get to My Way. You get to that album. And if for the viewers that have not watched the Expeditiously episode, we encourage you to go watch it. What up, Tip? Shouting you out. Hopefully you
VIP, the king.
the king. But if you haven't seen the episode, it's really, really, really good. He does talk about Usher, them being intentional of naming it My Way after they thought about Bobby Brown, which he said he wanted to pattern himself after.
Yep.
Now that I think about it, and I think Rashad, we've talked about this, it makes perfect sense that he wanted to be Bobby Brown. It makes perfect sense. But
I mean, you can see the influence all in that, because like My Way is, I said earlier, but it kind of, you can compare it to, it's like his Control album, like Janet's was Control, like she finally in control of what she want to talk about. Young. And then it's also reminiscent of Not Be Cruel. No, that is the name of
My Prerogative.
No, Prerogative is the name of the album. Yeah. And that's the same thing with kind of Bobby Brown, On My Own Terms. So that's kind of like right, like that My Way is right in line with those two, whatever. Not sound wise, but just like conceptually.
Yeah.
But again, it's that coming of age story, like that we've seen time and time again. Now his was a little weird because he was singing songs like a 30-year-old man on the first one.
Right.
But this one came right on time. He
went through a vocal change. Sorry, I thought it out.
Yeah, he went through a real serious vocal change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, like, he grew up, like we said, he was growing up. So, you know, guys go through puberty, your voice changes, and that just happens. And he had to like roll with it and find his voice again.
Yeah. But I also feel like with this album, although we have the amazing, how can you forget how iconic You Make Me Wanna, like, how iconic was that video? Like, I say the title and I automatically see him in that orange shirt, sliding across that floor. Like, every guy wanted to be Usher watching this video. You wanted the six-pack, you wanted the U-chain, you wanted all of that, you know? And so iconic, but also, and of course we got My Way, Tyrese's, one of his first videos he was in. You got him in there, and then you got Nice and Slow with Kimora in there as well. But one of the things that I think people fail to mention about this album, he was singing ballads on here, and I mean his vocals on this album, to be 17 years old, 16, 17 years old, singing like that. I mean, his voice was like, I can't even describe it. Like the boy was singing to be that age.
Yeah, it was definitely a hint of, you know, what was to come.
Yeah,
absolutely. And of course, we can't forget Slow Jam, which
that's what I was about to say. You know, that's my song.
With Monica, right?
With Monica, shout out to Mo.
And I think around this time is when he was on Moesha as well, right? Yeah, so it was kind of like they were priming him for that teen sensation, where because he recurred on Moesha actually a lot. Now that I rewatched it, I didn't realize how much he was in the show. But
he was on that show. They dropped these singles. At this point, to your point, Rashad, he becomes a heartthrob. I mean, girls everywhere were talking about Usher Raymond and this six-pack and him sliding and gliding everywhere across the floor. So, My Way is one of those albums that you have to have listened to in the 90s growing up. It just was one of those albums. You can't forget those singles. And so we're moving on. We move from My Way, right? That's 1997. It gets weird for a second.
A little.
It gets a little weird because we get this single out of nowhere. I remember riding in the car. I just hear a song talking about pop your collar.
Right.
And I was like,
hey, what song is this?
The one written by Candy. It's.
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about.
Hey, ladies. Yeah. Hey, fellas.
Hey, fellas. Yeah.
Oh,
okay.
I
forgot about that.
It was cringe worthy.
Man.
And you know, go ahead, Terry.
No, you got it.
No, I was just gonna say, you know, leading up to the album we're about to go into, you know, those songs were leaked. Those songs were leaked, and at the time, Napster, before streaming happened and all that stuff, like we had the peer-to-peer sharing networks, and Napster was like the new thing on the horizon of the music business. That was like the big scary bear or whatever. And some of his songs had leaked, and that actually kind of forced him to go back and kind of like rework some stuff and like actually, get what we got. But I don't want to get too ahead.
So they dropped this single. I can actually remember. I think I could have been talking to you, Rashad, because I
think it worked. Yeah.
We were like, what is this? Like, what is this? Because it was too poppy. Like for him, it was just like, okay, this is not. And it's so funny because a lot of Candy's songs outside of like the DC songs, people were kind of like, okay, this is a little different. She was really ahead of her time with her writing style and the beats that she chose. Because I think her single, Think I'm Not, I didn't like it until years later. I didn't appreciate the song.
I love that song. I was in 4th grade. Hey, think I'm not.
So we get Pop Your Collar, and then the next thing we know, we move on to 8701, right?
8701.
8701. Right.
When I tell you, so I think this is where like Usher starts to really pick up. Like this is where Usher is becoming like Usher.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's becoming a man, and he's talking about stuff that actually like goes along with him being a man because he's a man now.
But it's like, again, they had finally found that coming of age story. Like they had finally figured it out, right? Because 8701 is like, okay, I'm leaving being a teenager. I'm a young guy,
young adult. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've fallen in love, but I kind of want to still be young. They figured it out. I mean, he had all the right people on this album.
Yeah, really.
Like, you got Neptunes. This was early Neptunes when they were just
early Neptunes
beating people.
They were popping.
Yeah.
On everybody's track.
Yeah.
Everybody.
He got Neptunes. He got Jermaine Dupri, Jimmy Jam, Terry Lewis, Shakespeare. B. Cox. He got the perfect storm of people for this album.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what I like is that they matured them, but not matured them too much. They did just enough. Like I said, it was young adult. So it's nothing kiddie, but nothing too like old at the same time. Just still like figuring out life, figuring out love and relationships and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's like his college album. He was in college at this point.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
And I know he's leaving at that point. He's no longer on the Face. He's on air stuff at this point. But they figured it out. Like they had figured out their coming of age story. So he transitioned with that. And so off of that album, when I asked you guys really quickly, actually I'll say that because I was going to ask what our favorite songs off that album were, but we'll go back when we talk about like discography.
Okay.
And we talk about our favorite albums. But yeah, so you get to 8701. Some of the singles on there are You Remind Me, You Got It Bad, You Ain't Got a Call. Come on now, skate. I think the funniest part, and I didn't realize this until years later, that the You Remind Me video was like the girls in the video were supposed to be different girls that he had been romantically linked to. I thought that was so funny. I thought that was funny.
And I thought it was cool, even with those 3 central singles, they made it they were all connected.
Yes, it was a story.
It was a whole story, which was really cool. Each video was actually different, but it still had the same like through line.
Right.
Like, Chili was the girl, and then they break up and stuff, and then it's like he's getting over her. Like it's really, I thought that was really neat.
Right, and that storyline kind of flowed into the next album.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think again, this is where this will come up later. But Usher is known for this. He'll start these stories or these albums seem like they have a concept to them, and then they just go somewhere else. You don't know what happened. But that becomes a theme in his career. And we'll touch on that a little bit later, but that just, let's keep that in the back of my mind. That becomes a theme for him. It's like they know where they want to go. Then you get halfway through the album, you like, I don't know where I am at this point.
Right.
What's going on?
Like, where did this come from?
He goes on that 8701 tour, which I feel like, for some reason, I feel like everybody went except for me. I don't know. But
I didn't go either, bro.
You didn't go either? Oh, okay.
You ain't alone.
I just feel like everybody was there, like during that time, because when that came out, we were probably 7th grade, maybe.
Yeah,
Like,
I think I
around,
was in 6th, 7th.
yeah,
Yeah.
6th, 7th, around that. And I just feel like everybody was there except for me. But but yeah.
Yeah. So you got that album. It drops. And it's so crazy because that album, a lot of the singles were great, but a lot of the album songs were like songs that people remember.
Yeah.
He had a lot of great album cuts.
Like Can You Help Me is one of them.
That's a good one.
That's a really, really good one. What's the one with Diddy? That one's kind of
I don't know.
That one. Yeah, I don't know. I think
that's my shit. After the
right.
night. Yeah.
I love that song when it growing up or whatever. I put on my own little concert or whatever. Come up with my own performance. But yeah,
I got a whole routine.
You got a whole routine.
Yeah,
but I believe that one was supposed to be a single, but then it ended up being one.
Yeah.
A lot of people
I like If I Want To too.
If I Want To is another one.
That's my song. Yeah. A lot of people like Twerk It Out, which is
I like Twerk It Out too.
Yeah.
A lot of people like Twerk It Out. I didn't really like the song.
It's a good album. The only thing about it, it's a really good album. The only thing about it is it's very early thousands R&B / pop. Like it's very that. Like when you listen to the songs, it is. But it's good.
Yeah, because when you go back and think about it now, like I don't think that I could bump that album now, like and just ride. Like I think I would like have a nostalgic moment and be like, oh, I remember when. I might be in my feelings for a minute, but I can't just ride with that album. Like,
after Can You Help Me, I was done.
Yeah.
Like once I hit that track, it was like okay, because U.H.E.R, it was like, that's not a cute dance, but nice try.
So and that again goes with his brand because you remember they started trying to like, he had like a little dance routine situation. They was like, learn this dance from Usher. And like they was just really overdoing it at that point.
Yeah, they were figuring it out for sure.
Right.
But it's like this solidified him as I think this album solidified him as a front runner and somebody to really like look out, because I think he got a lot of awards out of this one and a lot of accolades and stuff. So I think this kind of solidified him as a superstar.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Yeah. And isn't this around the time where he like started doing movies? Or was this?
It was right around this time. Yeah. So we get this album.
Sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, and I just lost it. It was something else about the album. I don't know. I'll say it if I remember it, but yeah.
Sorry. So we get so excited, guys. Sorry. So U-Turn was actually a very late single because it didn't come out until like that album had ran its course by the time U-Turn had
right.
And we were kind of like, okay, what's next now? Because remember, you said this was like 2001. This was like the turn of music because remember we started seeing a turn happen. So
because the iPod came out. And like you said, Napster, everything was changing.
Yeah, everything was changing. Even
everything was changing.
Yeah, the artists were changing. Subject matter.
I think. Oh, I remember now with this album. I think that. I mean, this album didn't do this for R&B, but it's one of those albums that all his singles were very. They were considered pop. Like it's when all the R&B stuff was the pop music. Or whatever, and it was just like I know they were saying like it was rare for like You Don't Have to Call because it had like 2 bridges in it, and all these different things, and they're like, oh, now it's like a pop hit, you know. And You Remind Me became a pop hit. You Got It Back, even though those are R&B songs, or one is like a R&B dance song, but they all became like mainstream hits, and that's very it's very important to that album, that time, that era, or whatever.
Yeah, it's one. You're absolutely right. It wasn't the album that started, but it was like. I think that during that time, producers, the way that they were producing the records and the writers, it was very reminiscent of like pop era. So his was a big one. That last Destiny's Child album was a big one. I'm thinking like Pink's album, her very first album was a big one. Like that, they all were very like you could hear the R&B influences, but they were very much so pop. At the time. So we get to this point. And I think R.A.Y Reid has said this before. We get to this point and we have gotten, the heartthrob, but nobody truly knew who Usher was. Like nobody knew him, nobody knew his story. He didn't have many, like, he wasn't, because remember, this is like like stan culture, like we didn't have social media, so we didn't know these artists. But with him being as big as he was, we didn't know anything about him. We didn't know anything about his love life. We didn't know anything about like his story, what he cared about. And so we transitioned. And before I go there, I'm sorry, because I'll lose this. It seems like, because we talked about this in one of our episodes about the albums, he had found like a musical marriage with Jermaine Dupri. Like they had figured it out. They worked and they, had found some success. So he continued to stay with Jermaine Dupri. We move into 2003's Confessions, which we know is probably one of the biggest R&B records of all time. And we move into this, and I think it was very strategic in the way in which they approached this album.
Oh, yeah.
Rashad says this all the time, the stars aligned for Usher for this album. It did. So
it really did. Like, it really did. Like, it's just like, it's rare to get an album where, like, plenty of people say, oh, you can play this album front to back. Like, of your favorite albums personally. But this is one of those rare ones where it was like really like everybody enjoyed it on the same level or whatever, where it was kind of like everybody just about liked every song, and for me personally, I think it was maybe like 2 songs that aren't my favorites, but I can still listen to them. But yeah.
1.1 million the first week. Ladies and gentlemen, we are talking hard copy albums, not streaming.
Right.
People physically went to the store and got this album. 1.1 million, over 200, 20 million albums sold. Over 20 million albums sold.
I still got mine.
Listen, I mean, I remember it being the biggest thing because
it was massive.
Yeah, I mean, you had the rumors about him in Chile, which people don't really know, like what we know now, but him and Chile had already been broken up by the time this album dropped. I think that had happened, as they were curating the album, but they had broken up. But it was just like everything fell in line. We found out years later that Confessions wasn't even his story, but everything just made sense. Like it just was on time.
Yeah, and the anticipation was there as well, because like back then you weren't dropping albums every year. Like it was some years in between 8701 and Confessions, so everybody was like, okay, it's about that time, we ready, where's that, where's it coming?
I mean, the pressure was on, like, you got to follow up. You had a very successful, this 8701, it's like, okay, where do we go now? And like Terry said, it wasn't his story fully. I did read that some of the songs are some of his experiences, but like the main like concept wasn't his story per se. But I think I don't know. Yeah, I forgot where I was going with it, but yeah.
All right, I'm sure it'll come back.
It's okay. The story of the Confessions and stuff just aligned with his story that we thought was going on in real life, and everybody just wanted to know what was happening. So they bought the album thinking that was what was happening.
Yeah.
But that's how and that's what I think that's what's missing now, the story and the music. And even if it's not real, like the imagination, like the album had my imagination running wild. Like, ooh, did this happen? Did this happen? So he was in the Beverly Center. So okay,
right.
I don't even know at that point, because we were in we were freshmen, I think, in high school.
Freshmen, I think, when it came out. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't even know what the Beverly Center is. But
I don't either.
He was there. He was there. Right. But I mean,
all the singles, all the videos, like they were all good. And like to start it with start that whole thing off with was a stroke of genius, because what I was reading was that was like the last song that like it wasn't even on the album originally. Like, and R.A.YM was like, yo, it's missing something. Yeah. And then they came up with and then they didn't even know if they wanted to release that first. It was gonna be burned. And I'm like, I'm so glad they went with because I feel like that's how you needed to start it off, with something big, hype, and just fun.
Yeah,
I think and something different too.
Yeah,
because I know me being an Usher fan, I didn't like I was like, why is Usher doing this stuff with Lil Jon trying to be crunk and stuff. No,
see, yeah,
I
Crunk
want
was
some
new.
ballads. I
Crunk
want
was
some
new.
R&B.
We do have to remember, Crunk was new at that point, so it was like a new everything. Yeah.
Well, we just said that, right? 2001, this album drops. That man wrote that album. He wrote, 8701, 2001. He rides that album out till no return. The music started to change. This is when Crunk is like, everybody's putting 808s in their track. Yeah. People singing, rapping, you know, like they doing all that. It was genius. You know, you had up and coming Sean Garrett. He writes the track, and I think he even referenced in his verses like Usher did not really care for the song. He didn't like the way he didn't like the demo version. He just didn't like it at all and did not want to record it. And so they recorded.
And Lil Jon, I mean, he wasn't unproven, but he wasn't Lil Jon yet. You know what I'm saying? Like he wasn't, you know. And what I was reading was, I think when they were considering Burn for the first single, Lil Jon leaked the song to radios because he was so confident and he was like, this needs to be it. And it took off on its own. They didn't have no video or nothing for it. It just took off. And then they were like, well, we're going with this now. So
it was genius. You got and we talked about this in the album episode where he drops that one, and then you got it just everything aligned. You got that one, then you got the goodies, and you got the Petey Pablo dropping at the same time. I remember people were so confused, they didn't know what was what. Like it just worked out. It just worked in their favor. So the stars align. You got this album, it drops. I mean, you have everybody from, you know, Jermaine Dupri, Lil Jon, Rich Harrison, Jimmy Jam, Terry Lewis, Robin Thicke, Brian Michael Cox, Just Blaze, Dre Vidal, and Big Jam.
Everybody.
Everybody. And their mama.
And like with this album, again, you see a growth in Usher's artistry. His vocals, again, like he's singing harder. He's singing like, I mean, he's showing more of his range and more his versatility as a singer. Yes. And what I was reading again was that like Dre and Vidal, I think they were one of the ones, they were like, we want to get him to really sing on this one or whatever. And that's some of the stuff they crafted was more for him to really like showcase. But I feel like all of it, like you just saw him grow as an artist on that album.
Yeah, I think his falsetto had grown because I think he was still like anybody that is a singer, they know like you're always playing with your voice, and then with him being a man, you know, that changes often. But I think he had been working on that falsetto for some time, and it felt like he had finally found what his falsetto sounded like in his own voice. Like he wasn't trying to mimic anybody. You could hear it in the songs. The songs were just well written. They were just well written songs.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that album.
Very well written songs, very well produced songs. I think. Come back to me.
We're coming back because I know what you're thinking. We are gonna come back to this because again, this is another theme for Usher. We talked about this theme. He starts off with these great concepts, and then you be like, "What the is going on?"
Right. And I do think with that, like we've mentioned it before, that it did feel like a story when you're first listening to it, and then it kind of just goes off into other songs. I mean, those songs still connect to the concept, but it's just they're not sequenced in a way that it would flow like a story. But I mean, great album, great songs. Oh, this is what I was going to say. To me, also showed the versatility of R&B. Like it all wasn't just one type of R&B. Like it was all kinds of stuff they were doing on that album. So
absolutely. So we leave Confessions.
Oh wait, Diamond album.
Diamond.
It went Diamond. And this was the last Diamond album for like 10 years, right? Before Adele came out with 21. That was the last one.
He rides this album for some time, and for me,
he rides that album for a good while.
Right. I was just about to say, he drops a special edition with a couple new singles. You know, My Boo with Alicia Keys came out.
He does it. He re-releases the album with those new songs.
And it extends it even more because like My Boo was a hit. And then there was another song that was kind of a hit, but like they were popular, right? Like Red Light and
Seduction.
Seduction.
Yeah.
But I think he rides this album as long as he can. He has the tour.
The tour is a great tour.
Right.
He does that special too, right? The little where it's like 4 or 5 videos connected or whatever again.
Yep.
It didn't like go real big or anything, but I thought it was a cool concept.
Yeah. At this point, he becomes the current reigning champ or king of R&B at that point. Undisputed.
He's the man at this point. He's the global superstar. Like he's at the top of the food chain at this point.
Because I think people that are R&B heads, there's always in the 90s, there's always this dispute about Robert R. Kelly being the king and Usher being the king. But I think we cannot take anything away from R. Kelly when it comes to his writing and producing. We can't take that away. But when we talk about full artistry, we talk about like just at this point, there's no arguing, debating. Usher takes that seat. He doesn't even have anybody that comes close to him at this point. So I think you get to this point, 2003, 4, 5, because he writes that album. He's high off that success. I know he goes on to do some other things. He goes to, I think he picks up being part owner of the Cavaliers at that time. Like he was just doing different stuff, right? So I think,
what now? You know, probably like take a little break, like because that was a massive success, you know. And one thing to put in context, just for music at that time, like I said, it's the last diamond, and that really did cap off that because Terry, we talk about all the time, like 04 is kind of is another cutoff where like the tide is changing with music. Like we had some great albums come out in 05 and 06, 07, things like that, but it felt like everyone was hitting on all cylinders up until 04. And then that's when there's a significant shift in things, especially with more of the rise of iTunes and everything. LimeWire and everything like that. And just the music, the sound of music and what was popular, what's considered popular. Because remember, we started to kind of go into dance pop it will start to become the main mainstream music or whatever. But
absolutely. And you start to see that change from R&B dominating, because this will then become the first time in over 20 years where R&B is not the dominant music. And you start to see it becoming contemporary. They start putting these other names on the music because
more hip hop.
And that's what I was about to say. You see the marriage between R&B and hip hop, with Ja Rule and Ashanti, and it was just a whole bunch of hits where you had a rapper on the track or you had an R&B person on a rap track, and it was like you couldn't separate the two. I absolutely hated that because I like both, don't get me wrong, but like putting them two together all the time, it's just like you're not giving both of them, their shine that's due to me.
Because it starts to affect the production too, because like you guys said, a lot of those were super successful, a lot of those collaborations. So, but then instead of it affecting hip hop, it more so affects R&B, and R&B starts to turn into hip hop sounding. Like the production starts to become a little bit more hip hop and things like that.
Exactly.
And it's interesting because remember, if we go back, when Puff hits the scene, it was him that really pushed that in the forefront, the merger between R&B and hip hop. We see it with Mary, we see it with Joe, we see him doing it. Yeah, we see that, right? But it wasn't to the point where the R&B was overshadowed. I think he even talks about Biggie being a little reserved of some of the samples, the R&B samples, because he didn't want it to overshadow like the hip hop in music. So it's funny how 20 years before you didn't really, it didn't do it, but then we fast forward 20 years later and you see that like it's becoming overshadowed. You know what I'm saying? By the 80, and I think we say it's the artist, but really it's the production. You know what I'm saying? Now you got 808s, you got all type of crunk beats coming up, and people aren't really singing; they're halfway singing, and so you see that.
Snap music is
they
huge
sing rapping
at this point. All the party songs, like the snap music and Soulja Boy hits the scene. Like this is all right after Confessions. Like all this stuff starts like happening. Yeah,
because it's so funny that we say that because during that time, when you said that, the first songs that come to mind, I think about Destiny's Child Soldier, and I think about Monica doing Every Time the Beat Drops, and or I think about Cherish, their songs, like they were heavily loaded with like kicks and bass and snare, like that's all you heard, and you could barely even hear the singers like singing on the tracks. So I think this is where we get to, he takes this, I guess, hiatus. I'm sure he was trying to figure out what was next. We get to 2008's Here I Stand.
Now, this is where things, kids at home, this is where things start to get a little tricky with Usher and his career.
We get to Here I Stand. As we all know, during this time, he gets married. He parts ways with Jonetta.
Momager,
which I think was one of the biggest mistakes for his career.
Same. I was like, you cannot leave Miss Patton at Jonetta. She needs to go with you.
Right. Ooh. But also, he has a kid.
Yeah, he has a kid. He also, again, he stays with Jermaine for this as well, Brian. But he starts adding more people.
Starts adding in other people.
He adds in Ego. He adds in Polo Don, Dream, Danger. He starts adding in some people to the mix. He even has Dark Child on here as well. So for me, when I think about this album, you have "Love in This Club" was the first single. You got. I love "Love in This Club." I was like, okay. I was like, okay, we see where he's going. Okay.
Yes. Right. And then the Jeezy feature.
Yep. Right. And to put in context, we were about freshmen in college.
Yep.
When this album dropped, and I bring that up because, well, I don't want to get too early, but go ahead. No, I'll wait till we get into the music.
Well, I'm gonna say this again, kids at home. This is true artistry when your one album holds you for all those years before you drop another album, because people were still referencing them tracks on that album.
Yeah.
Even until he dropped this one. But anyways, people thought they were gonna get a Confessions Part 2 for all those years. They were sitting up in their seats, literally.
And here we are, still waiting on it.
I don't. Anyways.
Well, I mean, it starts off strong, right? It starts off strong with a good single with "Love in This Club,"
right?
But then kind of we lose it right there.
So you get,
and then they had the remix, "Love in This Club" with Beyonce and Wayne.
Yeah.
He had a lot of good features on this album, and you see him like bringing in, like we were talking about, the hip hop. Jay-Z, everybody was on here.
Yeah, I'm glad you left it right there at that. I'm glad you didn't go further and talk about that remix. Thank you. We disrespect here on our channel. But you got "Love in This Club Part 2, Moving Mountains," which was a well-written song. I love that song. You also, I don't recall.
I love Trading Places.
I did too.
That was a good single.
Ooh, that was a
good single.
It was.
Yeah. A good single. So you got these, and he also has "Here I Stand" and "What's Your Name." Those were two other singles released from the album. The songs were well written on this album. Vocally, he was strong on this album.
Very strong, yeah.
But it didn't make sense.
It didn't connect all the way. You know what's funny is that album, like you said, it does have some great songs on there. It's got beautiful ballads on there from him. But because when I was reading, it was like critically, it was considered pretty good, but it was like, but with the actual audiences, like it didn't really connect. And I feel like with that album, why I say we were freshmen, I say that because that album, I felt like they just matured him too much. Like they just made him like way older than like what he was. And I know he was inspired by his like marriage and the birth of his son. And I know, to me, they hit it over the head a little too much with this whole mature thing. I'm married now. I have a kid now. I'm fully in my manhood. Like they just, when you listen to those songs, it's very heavily that. And it's just like I'm thinking about we were freshmen in college, and it's like we kind of like sitting there like, oh, this is cool, but like, we're not there. We're not there yet or whatever. And we're kind of his core, like at that point, his core audience.
That's tricky though, right? Because
right, it is tricky.
Technically, we weren't we were a part of that core, like we were.
Well, yeah.
But the people his age, like it made sense for them because technically they should be at the point they're getting married, they were having kids, like it makes sense. But I do think that the ones that were still buying albums and that could actually push this album, which was our age bracket, it was just too much for us. And plus, because of like how young he was and how young he looks and how they made him still be young, because like by the time 8701 came out, let's go back, he was actually a little bit older than what we thought he was on that album. And so it's like, I think it was a little confusing to us because it's like, he should be talking about this right now. Like, that's not where I am in my life. Like, it was just very confusing.
Right.
I think he also had a lot of competition. At this point, Chris Brown came out for our generation. And then I feel like around 2008, you had The Dream, you had Jamie Foxx. Those are my albums. I only listened to this album once and I was done.
And like I said, I mean, I like a lot of the songs in there. I think they're really good. And when it came out, I thought some of the same songs were really good. It's just, I don't know. It was just something about the era that wasn't really popping to me. I was just kind of like, this is cool. Like, I take the songs that I like and I listen to those, and that's about it.
Same. That's how I was.
Yeah, and I think it felt as if because Confessions was such a huge album, it was just like, how could this be? We waited all these years.
Right.
This is the follow-up that you give us. It wasn't that the work was bad. It wasn't that it wasn't good. It was just like, dang, this ain't a good follow-up.
Kind of boring.
Yeah.
A little boring, like, and not boring as far as, I don't know, not because the music is good, but it's like overall everything, like it's just, I don't know, like that era is just real, like, to me, like, I was just waiting. I couldn't wait for it to be over, and I was looking forward to the next album. I was just like, I'm ready for him to come out with something else.
Right.
And I think too, because we didn't see him as typical Usher before we close this out, because on that album he wasn't doing a lot of dancing, which we had known him for. It wasn't, you didn't get that from him. It was more, like you said, ballad heavy. I think he had like that one performance at the BET Awards, and like I remember rooting for him. Like, well, he about to get up here and kill it, and I was just like, because he didn't even performing it vocally, he sounded a little tired. He didn't sound like himself. He didn't even move like himself at that point. And it just seemed like he was just tired. It seemed like he probably was tired from trying to figure it out. And just and
he is older though. You gotta think about that.
Yeah. And I said that earlier, like the reality is that Usher is a lot older than what we think he is, like career-wise, he is older. And by that time, he's 25 years, I think, in the game by that point, like 20-something years in the game by that point. So we get that album.
Sorry. One more thing about that album. I always do this. I lose it right when I'm about to say it.
And then you think of it.
And then it'll come back.
It'll just come right back, yeah. But it was something about that album. One more thing I had to make note of, but I don't know. Continue.
So we get to Raymond versus Raymond, 2010, right?
Now this is where we pick it back up, kids.
Right.
So Rashad and I both have said, looking at this album, this was the album that would have made sense to come after Confessions.
Yes.
Just would make sense.
This seems like the actual follow-up to Confessions. Actually, it really does. Even in its concept, it seems like it would fit right after that. I think with this, I do think this album is underrated from a lot of people. Because it's a really, really, really great contemporary R&B record. And when I say contemporary, I mean as far as like in that time, like what was popular and everything, but also it has stuff that was kind of a little bit futuristic, and then it has stuff that was still rooted in its R&B base. But it's very underrated. Like I don't think a lot of people realize how successful that album was for him and how successful the singles were off of that one. And I do think the start to it was slow, with coming out with Daddy's Home. I do not think that was a good first single at all.
No.
But and then Little Freak was next, and I like that song a lot. But I was like, there were other songs on the album I was like could have came out first.
Actually, Papers was the first single.
Was it really?
Yeah, because
because he was going through the divorce.
Yeah. And
it was a buzz.
Yeah, and he does not like that song.
I don't like it either.
It's ugly. Like, to me, they were trying. To me, this is the worst thing you can do as an artist, is try to recreate your like behemoth album or whatever. Like, stop. Like, or your big song. Like, stop, because you set yourself up for failure when you try to do that. And it's all, you're always like, this is the next so and so. No. Because like Papers was definitely them trying to do Confessions. And that's what that was.
They were trying to take real life drama,
and they were trying to do it all over again.
Yeah, and it didn't work because, for one, nobody. Now, and we say this all the time on this channel, we don't actually get into like the gossip. We want to stick to the facts. But the reality is, like, people were not excited about him getting married. Like,
right.
Like, nobody was excited for that because
and a lot of the women fans seem like they weren't into his wife. Like, it was some that was like they're not into him getting married, and then there was some that was just like, we just don't like her.
I wasn't she like the stylist or something?
She was the stylist, and she was a little older.
So.
She was a little older.
Yeah, she was a little older.
People didn't
that's what I was gonna say about Here I Stand. It's okay to want to mature and talk about where you are, but it's the way you execute it. Like, they should have just been a little smarter about still keeping it youthful, but they can still be mature. Like, there's a way to do it, but like, that's why.
Yeah, it's all about balance.
It's about balance, and I don't think they went too far over to that other side. They didn't. That's what it was. They didn't bring us into it. Nope. They just, it was Confessions, then they just hopped right over to, instead of like transitioning him and his fan base into that. But
but I think also it was like, you gotta think about it from an artist standpoint. It was probably one of those things of, this is where I am, and I just want to be truthful in who I am, and this is what I want to talk about, and not so much of the star was talking at that point. Like, there was no thought about the brand at that point. We had saw, like, throughout his career, it was always about the image of the star, the celebrity. Every single album was like calculated, and we know that. Every single album after My Way was calculated. But then we get to that album, and it's almost like, these are my feelings, and this is just what I want to talk about, and that's what we're gonna talk about. It was no thought to that. And so then we get to Raymond versus Raymond. Yes, he has Papers, Hey Daddy, Little Freak, OMG, There Goes My Baby, and more. Like, great singles, great songs, released at weird times,
See, what I think happened, my theory, like, Daddy's Home came out, but a lot of people seem to like it. I thought it was a good song, but not first single, not first single material. Like, what?
Right.
And then Little Freak comes out. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Terry.
To me, Little Freak should have been the first single because
Nicki was hot.
Nicki was on fire.
Yes. The barbs were going crazy.
Yeah, and you're coming back. This is the first single, because people didn't already doubted you on Here I Stand.
Yeah, people already don't put you to kind of like.
He not the king. I thought is this your king? Is this your king? People questioning if he the king. Right. People questioning. You know what I'm saying? And Little Freak just made sense. It should have been the first single, would have got the younger generation because of Nicki and the Barbs, that whole fandom, but then also would have brought his older fans because he had the Stevie Wonder sample in there. Shout out to Polo.
Right. For that. Great use of that sample, by the way. I thought that was just so creative the way he used that sample.
You got Aunt Esther Dean was on fire at that time too.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, she was writing Rihanna. She was everywhere. So there were so many other songs on that album that could have been the first. Like, Little Freak definitely should have been one. But that like, there were so many other songs they could have used. But then it's like, when OMG hit though, like, that's what skyrocketed that whole era for him, or whatever was that OMG song. And
that was a crossover hit.
Nobody saw that coming. Like, nobody saw that coming at all.
Nobody saw that coming. So he has verses which is like this album, but it's like the second part, I guess, or like a remix.
Yes, it's basically just an extended. It's an EP that they had so much success, they were just like, let's throw out some more music we recorded. So
yeah, because you get on that one, you get DJ Got Us Falling in Love, Hot Toddy,
which was
Lay You Down. Yeah,
I love Hot Toddy.
I love Hot Toddy as well. So I mean, he had a lot of great songs. Again, he brings in some more new people as producers and writers, and I mean, he still has Jim Jam and Terry Lewis on it. But you see Jermaine Dupri is diminished a little bit. Like he's not really featured a lot on this one. Is like you said, Polo the Don and Bangladesh and Danger and this is when we're starting to see him with Rico Love a lot more. I mean, there goes my baby. He gets a good like adult contemporary and like contemporary hit. Like both young and old love that song.
Yeah.
Or whatever. Yeah. So I mean, they were striking like on all, like he had a big pop dance pop hit, and he had a big R&B hit and a big hip hop R&B hit. Like they were. That's a really good album.
So before we wrap up this album and go into the next, we have to say goodbye to Keisha because she has to leave us. So
bye. It's been fun. I guess I'll just leave comments so y'all can see how I feel about everything else. So whenever you watch this, go to the comments to see what I have to say about the end, the legacy, all that good stuff. They're gonna finish off the albums. I'm gonna let them have that. So y'all have a good night.
Thanks, you too.
Peace.
So Rashad, you were saying that you were talking about the albums and like the singles, how they were releasing them. So we can pick up there.
I was just saying the concept of I wish they would have went a little further with the concept of Raymond versus Raymond. To me, it was kind of like the duality of Usher, the superstar, and Usher, the person. And when you listen to the album, you can kind of tell which songs kind of fall into superstar Usher, like Little Freak or So Many Girls, things like that. And then what falls into the Usher, There Goes My Baby, or Mars versus Venus, things like that. So I think I just wish it was maybe. And when the album starts off with Monstar, you hear like there's three sides to every story, and it's this whole thing about being a star, but like turning into a monster at the same time. Like I just wish they would have went a little further with that and make that a little clearer within the album. But yeah, like we mentioned earlier, Usher and these concepts, they like seem to be going somewhere, and then they kind of like fall. But I mean, great singles.
It's so weird that you say that, because I think even around that time he released a song with Tip on Tip's album, My Life's Your Entertainment, and it talks about it almost could have fell on that album because it talks about being a celebrity and not having that privacy and people not respecting that privacy. So it seems like those were some of the themes that he wanted to go with for that time period. They didn't capitalize on that moment for whatever.
Yeah, they didn't capitalize on that moment.
Yeah,
like OMG set. I feel like OMG is what's interesting about OMG, that single. I think it set him on the path of like where he started to lose a lot of people. Like the success of that and the success of DJ Got Us Falling in Love, and as like we said, dance pop was the forefront of like pop music at that point or whatever. Like I think that sent him down a path that like it's been a little hard for him to recover from in a bit. And that I mean that for his fans who don't like that type of stuff from him.
Absolutely. Yeah. You started to see him lose a lot of fans. Because of that, they didn't like the sound. In the time period,
but he gained a lot of fans with that sound, right?
Absolutely. So
and people started, which I don't necessarily say, but a lot of people started to be like, Usher's following trends. Usher's following the sound. Like he doesn't have his own thing anymore. So that's what the people were saying at that time when those singles started to take off, and then that seemed like that's what they were pushing mostly at that point.
Yeah. So we get to 2012, and at this point, he has an entirely different group of people he's working with at this point. You don't see anybody that you've previously seen. This is when Rico gets a little bit heavier for sure on this next album, which is Looking for Myself. Singles are Climax, Scream, Let Me See, Numb, Dive. I was, at this point with Usher, I think I was a little bit frustrated with him at this point, just because I just felt like with that last album, I didn't know what direction he was going. And I'll tell you the truth, when I first heard Climax, I wasn't the biggest fan. I didn't appreciate that song until years later. Like, I didn't appreciate the subject matter. Like, Rico wrote the hell out of that song. Like, that was a well-written song.
Yeah.
And so I didn't appreciate, is that Rico? I think, or is that Dive? Dive is Rico.
Dive was Rico, but I don't know if Rico, I think it might have been Diplo and Usher that was Climax.
It's Diplo. Sorry, forgive me. But yeah.
So that pairing of them, that pairing of them, I thought was really, really interesting and really new and really cool for Usher. Like you said, you didn't maybe catch on to it, but when it came out, I loved it. I was like, whoa! Like, I was like, is this where we're going? Like, you know, because it was this electronic, you know, dubstep R&B kind of thing, and there had been, to my knowledge, there hadn't been anything like it yet. It was like a brand new sound, and his vocals on it were crazy, or whatever, a great vocal performance, and that led me and others to believe this was the direction of this album, because it was the album Looking for Myself was, they were putting it up as experimental. Yeah, experimental. This is going to be experimental. This is going to be revolutionary pop is what they were calling it, and things like that. And I just expected, like, when I heard that song, I was like, oh man, I cannot wait for this album if this is where we're going. And then when the album came out,
so, and let me say this with respect, it wasn't that I did not like I love the new sound. I feel like vocally, it was back to showing off the vocal skills that he had on this album, especially with this song and Dive. He was like really showing off his vocal ability, even in that Let Me See setup.
Yeah, I'm about to say Dive should have been a really big song. That should have been a big song.
Should have been.
I don't know what happened with that. Yeah.
But even Let Me See, the falsetto that he's using in there, they were all about showcasing his voice and vocal ability on this album. What for me, I just was like, I don't know if this is the right follow-up. Like, I just don't know if this is the right follow-up to these albums that he's had. And again, like you said, the fans that he had already lost, I feel like they just got further away.
They were going further away. Like,
I just feel like they just got further away because they were just like, right, at this point. Okay.
Right, because like I said, Climax came out. It was a big hit. Everybody liked it. Like the R&B people, the pop, everybody liked it, right? And then he came out with that Scream, and then he came out with the Let Me See, which was like, that's all right. It's generic R&B hip hop to me. And and it's like, what frustrates me so much, that album could have been the album for him. Like how Confessions was, that could have been the next big thing for him, because where they were going with it was so new. And for somebody of Usher's stature to go experimental like he was, and that it was working, well, the stuff that we were hearing was working.
Yeah.
Because when the album comes out, it frustrates me so much because I can hear where they were going.
Yeah.
Like that album almost sounds like two different albums. Like there's a subset of songs that fall in line with Climax and Dive. There's a subset of songs that fall in that line with those. I'm like, I think these songs were supposed to be like the album or whatever, like where they were going at first, but then it was like almost like they got scared or something, and then they reverted to what they knew. The dance pop was popping and that was gonna work, and then the generic hip hop R&B songs.
So
it's just frustrating.
So we've talked about that though, but this is like not only a theme for him where he finds something and he doesn't follow it for whatever reason, but we've also said before that this is a theme for Rico Love for whatever reason. It seems like when he gets with people, you have these great concepts, so they'll come up with it, and then it's like they get scared all of a sudden to follow through.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's because he's before his time a lot when he does these records. I don't know. But that seems to be a common trend for him as well.
Yeah. You do make a good point with that.
Yeah.
For sure.
So,
and it's just, like I said, I mean, it's just frustrating as somebody loves music and somebody's a big fan of Usher, because it's just like, dang, we really could have like went somewhere new with music. And it's like y'all just, and then the other song, like the singles they released weren't any of the other songs that fell with Climax. So I was just like, so people only got a sense from the singles what they thought, like the album didn't do well. I remember Chris Brown had came out with I forgot what album it was at the same time, and there was a big article in Billboard that was like, what's happening because somebody like Usher and somebody like Chris Brown didn't do big numbers this go around with their albums, and this is the type of music they're doing. So what is it really saying? Like it became kind of a thing. But yeah.
So then what you have is you start seeing him do this thing where he releases songs like Good Kisser. He has She Came to Give It to You.
She Came to Give It to You, yeah.
I Don't Mind with Juicy J. You got Chains as well. He releases those type of singles, and I know for sure we thought
I think they were throwing paint at the wall, like trying to see
what stuff. Yeah. But when Good Kisser came out, that was the one we said, "Oh, he's back."
Yeah. Remember, we were both like, "Oh yeah, like yeah, this is it."
Because it was that perfect marriage of classic R&B. Like you heard the Marvin Gaye.
Yeah, Marvin Gaye.
It was just like the perfect marriage. He had the new
perfect marriage of like you said, the past and like the present and future. Like it was that perfect marriage. And again, another frustrating moment with Usher and his career in music. Like I don't know what, like they did that. Then they do She Came to Give It to You, which I really liked. And it falls in line with Climax. And I'm thinking, okay, this is the direction of the album that they're going. And like you said, then they throw out, then stuff stops for a minute. Then I Don't Mind comes out. Yeah. And then it's kind of like, okay, what's going on? And then they release this hodgepodge of an album, but we'll get there. But
we're here.
Okay, we're here. So they released this hodgepodge of an album called Hard to Love.
Yeah.
Again, you can hear the songs on there that are in line with Good Kisser.
Yeah.
And the rest of the songs are because at this point, trap R&B and trap is like picking up steam. The rest of the album is that. And it's so frustrating because again, I was like, we could have went somewhere new with music. Yeah. Usher, again, could have been at the forefront of pushing the envelope, pushing music where we're going. Because somebody like Usher, this is what you're at the point. This is what you do. You don't follow the trend. Everybody else is doing. You don't follow the trends. You don't do the safe stuff. Yeah. You're at the point where you are leading the charge, and it's like Good Kisser was so cool, and I do believe that I feel like it was a number one and it was a big hit. To me, it could have been bigger, but again, that album, I'm just like I'm hearing these songs. I'm like, this would have been so cool if this is what y'all if this was the original vision, but y'all didn't go there. So.
But I think this is also where it gets interesting because unlike the deep dive we did previously with Brandy, who is a risk taker, Brandy, she will put out something and it may not catch on and people will appreciate it later. You don't see that so much with Usher. Like it's like he'll take a few steps and then he'll revert back to what is coming.
Yeah, it's like,
what's familiar.
No. Yeah.
Absolutely. You see that a few times with a couple of albums. And like you said, it almost became like he was just throwing stuff at the wall and trying to see if it'll stick.
Yeah.
That's what it is. And what's so funny is where he was afraid to go, you see other artists been doing it. And
everybody else went. Because that was like trap was trap was starting to come and everything. Like with Looking for Myself, that was the precursor. That was starting that alternative R&B, like the rise of it. Because it's alternative R&B's kind of been around for a little minute, but like kind of the rise of more of it. So it's kind of like he's always at the cusp of these new things, and I don't know if it's the team, I don't know if it's him, I don't know if it's all of them. Like I don't know what it is, but it's very unfortunate. It's very, very, very unfortunate.
And I think some of the albums we forgot to mention that I think by Raymond versus Raymond, he gets back with Momager at this point, right? Yeah, I think he gets back.
I think so, but I think also I think he lets her go again at some point.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
It's weird. Yeah. It's weird because the albums, it feels like the albums that she's present.
Yeah, it seems like the albums she's present, those are the ones that go off.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I don't know.
Maybe those are the people that know him, but yeah, Hard to Love was absolutely hard to love.
It was. It was hard to love.
And it pained me.
With love.
With love, we love you. But it just, as a fan of his artistry, you were frustrated right along with him, because you could tell he was frustrated because he was just throwing and trying to figure out what was going to stick. I think he was trying to, bring along the newer people that knew of him, but they weren't familiar, and trying to bring his fan base along, and it was very confusing. It got very confusing.
And I also want to say, even if some of the stuff didn't work with Usher, like his experimental stuff, like some of the stuff that might have been kind of jarring to some people's stuff, I still commend him for even going, because again, with Looking For Myself, he started getting with a lot of people he had never ever been with, and that is nowhere near the R&B or hip hop genre or pop genre. Like, people who were doing all kind of stuff. So it's just like, you have to commend them, but at the same time, it's like, if you're not gonna go there all the way, just don't do it, because
And with that being said, I think, like you said, he works with all different kind of people, but it's that fear of commitment that we continue to see for at least the last 4 albums that we see, the fear of commitment. But then, with all due respect, we won't really deep dive into A like that, because that is not, it's produced by Beethoven, a great producer in his own right. But the album, it just, I think from my understanding, that was for Atlanta, that was for their city. Great. But for him,
great for them, not so much for everybody else.
But at the same time, this is interesting, because now we get more into just outside of the albums. We get to this point. Usher was at the point in his career where it's like, I'm doing what I want to do.
Yes.
I don't have to do what other people want me to do. I've done all those things. So I think A was one of those, like, this is just what I want to do right now. And I'm going to do it, because we see him also release the single Crush with Yuna. Is it pronounced Yuna? He has that single. He was like, at that point, he just wanted to work with who he wanted to get, kind of work with the younger artists. That's what he wanted to do. And see him do that, because he had the song with Summer Walker come through. He also had Don't Waste My Time with LMA most recently, and then he joined forces again with Lil Jon and Ludacris to do Sex Beat. So I mean, all made sense, and I cannot believe that going back that we forgot about Lovers and Friends and how big that was.
I didn't care for that song. I didn't care for that song that much, but everybody else loves it.
What are you talking about?
No, everybody loved that song. I was like, oh, that's cool. But
yeah. With all due respect, we won't actually deep dive on A. Didn't spend a lot of time with it. At that point, I was like, okay.
I was over it. I ain't gonna lie. When I saw where they was going with it, I was like, nope. I mean, I listened to it because I was like, I'm gonna give it a listen. But I was just like, what are you doing? That's what I was like. But I think all I want next, don't try to give me No Confessions Part 2. Please do not try to give us a Confessions Part 2. You can give us something that's reminiscent, that's got the flavors and stuff, but I'm telling you, you set yourself up when you do that. I'm telling you.
It's hard to do that.
Like, it's hard. Like, don't even if in your head that's where you're going, don't tell us that.
Yeah.
because you're gonna compare it.
Yeah, you're gonna compare it. And the reason why it makes it so difficult is because the time period is different.
Yeah. Sounds
are different. The content can't be the same. Let that album be that album.
Because that's just like Mariah Carey when she had Emancipation, which is the big old comeback, and then she tries to do E equals MC squared, which is like Emancipation Part 2, and it's like, no, like that's where you mess up.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
But I mean, I agree with you, Terica.
So we have to, and we're gonna let Keisha put her albums on our page. If you follow us on Instagram, J2G Vlogcast on Instagram, but she'll put her favorite albums. But out of his catalog, what would you say are your top 3 albums?
Well, Confessions, of course.
Look up who we come.
Right.
Confessions,
Raymond versus Raymond, and I would probably say 8701.
Oh my
Like as far as like fully like listening to him from top to bottom. Yeah.
So I'm going, of course, Confessions.
Yeah.
I am then going with My Way.
Okay.
And then I'm going with Raymond versus Raymond.
All right.
Yeah, and 8701 is like a super tie, like
yeah,
it's close. But 8701 is just nostalgic for me, like that moment. But yeah, those are my top three.
What would you want to see next from Usher? Like what musically and everything? Like what do you want?
I want to go back to 2003. No, I'm just joking. I do want him to get back to his R&B roots. Because I'm telling you, the moment that from the time that I heard Good Kisser, I was like, this is just it. Like this is it, and I was on the edge of my seat for that moment.
I was too.
I mean, I love the other things that he's done. I love how innovative he's gotten, but I want to see him go back to those true roots. I do want to see him do some more maybe like live sessions because like people were like, as you like to say, salivating for the acapella. Like people have truly forgotten that how great of an artist or a singer he is. And
they have, and I say that all the time. I'm like, he needs to remind people. I feel like that will be a good part of your resurgence with your next album. Is like and your stuff leading up to the album. Remind people, like you're not just this entertainer. You're not just this great entertainer. Like you're actually a consummate vocalist. Like you're a real vocalist, and it's not a lot of those. It's not a lot of real male vocalists in R&B. When I say in R&B, I mean in mainstream R&B, like somebody on the Usher's level or a little bit under. Like there's really, I don't think there's anybody, honestly. Like there are some really good ones that are coming up, but I mean on the mainstream front or whatever, it's not too many real vocalists left, like male vocalists. And he needs to remind people, and I think a part of that he should do an Unplugged.
Absolutely.
Really do an Unplugged with, and my idea for his Unplugged would be some of his songs, of course, some of his hits, but also working in that Great American Songbook of stuff from like Stevie Wonder, stuff from Sinatra, stuff from she's not coming to my mind, Carole King. And Carole King and people like that, and Motown and the Brick Building, some of the Broadway stuff, like, because Usher can do it. He's very versatile vocalist, and I think that would just showcase another part of his artistry. Yeah. And I think that would be so cool for him to do some type of Unplugged thing like that, where he's doing his hits, but then some of the like just stuff that people would not expect him like to cover, and do cool arrangements on it. And what I also would like to see from Usher next, musically, I would just like to see him go fully conceptual all the way. And I'm not the words out of
my mouth, because that was my next thing. And I want, with him going conceptual, I do want him, because some people just have a musical marriage and those people understand them. And Jimmy Jam, Terry Lewis understand him, Jermaine, Brian, Adonis, I'm forgetting John, like they understand him as an artist. And even Rico, I'll give it to Rico as well. They understand him as an artist. Need you to go back for a little bit.
For sure. And I say work with all of them. And I'm open to working with some other new ones and stuff, because I like his experimental stuff. But what I want to say is, if we're going to go experimental, let's marry it with the other side and let's make it make sense. Sort of like the ones and Looking for Myself, like they were, like Climax was an R&B song, but it was also electronic and dubstep at the same time. So let's do that too, but like you said, full conceptual all the way. And what we mean by that, audience, is like one of the most recent examples we can give is like a Lemonade from Beyonce. Even though I don't think that's a great album, but the concept of it all, like how with the videos, even the way the album is and things like that, like he needs to go full on imaginative concept or whatever I think will work for Usher. And like you said, I want to see him return to some of his R&B roots, but I also still want to see him do some experimental stuff. Let's just make it all make sense together.
Absolutely.
And have somebody who can lead, an executive, whoever the executive producer is going to be, that can actually lead it and execute it in the way. So
it'd be good, like you said, and even if he doesn't want to marry them, have 2 separate sides of the album, which is fair, but follow it through. Like the reality is, like, follow it through. Like, I would love to get from him, if he's trying to look for material, you have a hell of a story, Usher. Like, talk about growing up in this business and how you had to find yourself, and you went through, like, I know what that looking for myself was, I guess what you was calling it. Like, really deep dive into finding love, losing love, gaining love again. You're 40 something years old or near 40, and you're about to have another child and being a father and watching it. Like, we want those stories. We want you to the imagination. Take us back to where you were playing with our imagination. We had to use our imagination.
We had to use our imaginations. And even in, like you said, if he went that way, like you're saying, you can still add a twist to it that makes it different, makes it imaginative or whatever. Like, you could still add a bent to it, you know. Like, there's ways to do this to, like, really, like, put himself back out there, like, as, because I just feel like a lot of people don't respect him enough. Like, a lot of your casual music listeners today, like, when you see stuff in the comments and things, like, I just feel like people have kind of forgotten. And I think a part of that is because he has started to become looked at as somebody that was following trends rather than leading the pack. But
and people, and this is the reality, even when that conversation came up last year about the king of R&B, right? He is undisputably, or has been for the last 20 years plus, he has held this thing down. And we're talking about every spectrum. But what was so sad is that it was even a conversation.
Right.
And because when you say Beyonce, there is no conversation. People don't even compare. You don't compare when you don't compete, period. People, people don't even think of anyone else. And again, we're not trying to separate or put one person higher than the other, but what we're saying is this man has done some massive things and people don't give him his flowers. They don't even respect him a lot as an artist. I think your musicians or your singers, they do. People are fans of music, but it's often that people even may not even mention his name when you think about, like, how iconic we talk about Brandy and Monica and Aaliyah. We think about them. Like, people often forget to mention his name. He was a child star during that time. He was huge. He has still continued to put out music. He's probably one of the greatest investments from a manager or from an artist or from a label. And people often don't talk about him.
He always has a hit. Like, always, even if the album's not some massive, he always has 1 or 2 hits in each little era of his. He always has a hit. So he's he's of the time. He's not washed or anything like that. It's just, it's like he just needs he needs the stars to line again for him or whatever. But
and you know what? And I'll be very fair in saying this. I think that because what we thought, like, the Vegas Strip, that idea of having a residency, back in the day, it used to be, okay, you're retired, and it's not that anymore. And maybe this will be a resurgence for people to appreciate him as a vocalist, as an entertainer, and for them to remember you cannot, now that I think about it, from this time period, there is nobody else. And even before him, because people would often reference, like, Mike, but also Mike had that, like, we grew up with him, but it was like that little break because he was still with the group. Like, Usher didn't have a group to catapult him. It's him by himself from day one.
Yeah, pretty much. And, like, people, always try to bring Chris Brown into the conversation, but it's like they don't sit in the same, they really, really don't. And I wish more people would realize that, like, they do not sit together at all. Like, they really don't. And that's not to say anything about Chris Brown, but he's a different stature. Because, like you said, the Vegas, maybe it will remind people of the type of entertainer he is. Because I think people forget, even with his entertaining and dancing, what he does is not, everybody can't do that. Even like my opinion, Chris Brown can't do what Usher does, like in certain things and certain styles of dance or whatever. But I feel like Usher can go over to Chris Brown's world. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So it's like,
absolutely,
Usher's just in a different league, even in the type of even the type of performer he is when he's on stage, and the way he performs, and the way he carries himself, the way he dances, and everything. It's different. But yeah,
it's different.
It's not you're not getting a club performance. You're getting an actual you're getting a show. But yeah,
and he's that. I mean, last of a dying breed. But I do feel like with the roses that are being given out here lately, from the verses into him getting this residency, I feel like people will start to see again or remember just how great of an artist he is. And I was talking to you earlier, and we said, if he wasn't here, what would we be missing? And I had to think about it. Honestly, he is the blueprint for everything that has come after, whether it's Chris, whether it's Trey, whether it's any young male R&B artist that came after him. He is that blueprint.
I agree.
He's the blueprint. And so we would have missed all of that. Had he, and
we would have never had Confessions. and some of because that album, I feel like you need that album in music history. You do need that seminal album. That's very important. Absolutely. So you'll be missing a lot for sure.
So we got What's Next one. We know he's doing the residency. We know the things that we've said we wanted to see. And I think his legacy is the fact that, I did forget about this. Let's not forget, Bieber. I know Keisha wanted to talk about Bieber. Him and Justin had that competition, and he ended up getting Bieber. Also, let's not forget One Chance, which was a group that was signed to him as well. I really actually liked them. Don't know what happened to them, but
I kind of like them too, but I don't know what happened.
I thought that the lead singer of that group, he reminded me so much of Usher. But I would love to see him doing that a little bit more again, where he has people up under his wings and helps them, helps to groom them a little bit. So I love to see him do that. I feel like he's at the point where he could give them some pivotal advice, and he could probably help somebody take their career to the next level. I know he's done that for plenty of other artists, but I would like to see it more. Maybe him have some artists of his own.
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's what it is with Usher Raymond. We'll look for this residency and what he's gonna do. Excited for him. Excited for the next phase. Usher, please have your people call our people. And but no,
we'll put that show together. Legally split.
We have you wrapped. We have you good to go. But anyways, Rashad, you want to take us out?
Well, thank you guys for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And that's it.
Bye, guys. Thanks for watching.